Hello, this is Will Faber from Art to Ride, and today I'm going to try to fill a request here. This is in Ithaca, New York. This is a 19-year-old horse who, as you can see here, has probably been hollow most of his life. And I'm going to take you through the process of getting him to stretch. Now, I've just started him here and just beginning to get him to step over a little bit. The biggest things with this work is just being very, very patient and very calm while you do this work. Basically, what I'm doing is very gradually asking him to step onto the middle of the body, as you can see there with his left hind leg as it steps onto the middle. When I find the right spot for the hind leg to step to, it will push the back up, and when the back pushes up a little bit, it will tend to push the neck forward into my hand. And that's the moment that I'm going to soften him just by keeping that elastic kind of contact with his mouth. And when he wants to stretch down, I'm simply allowing that to happen. Now, sometimes this takes some time. As you see, with this horse has never done this before. So he has no idea what I'm asking him to do. So I'm just very quietly asking him to step over a little bit at a time till I find that position. You see, when I find him step onto the right place, the neck automatically starts going out in front of me. When that happens, I yield my hands and he goes right into a stretch. All there is to it, really. Now, you can get stretches by, for instance, standing in front of horses and giving them treats and holding them down, so they stretch their head down. And that's all a good thing to do. I don't say not to do that. By all means, do. Anything that helps get the horse into a stretch is a good thing. But when you get it to really happen from behind, that's when it really does something for you. So as you see this horse, already he's beginning to stretch down. And look how much longer and deeper the step. Now, remember, this horse is 19 years old. He's been upside down most of his life. It was also quite a sluggish horse. But as you can see here, as he starts to stretch down, look how much more movement is in the hind legs. Now, this is also a horse that's built like many of your horses, then he doesn't have a great deal of flexion in his hocks. But what you'll see is as I get him working over his back, you'll see that flexion begin to increase, and you'll see him pick up his feet instead of them having that look of that they're stuck in mud, as you hear me talk about sometimes. And you'll see him actually flex those hocks more. That's all that I'm doing. So he follows down, and once again, look how much longer the step becomes as he stretches into the contact, because he can lift his back up, which allows the stride to continue, that is to complete itself through the back by pushing up through the back and letting that wave of energy move through the body of the horse. And that's ultimately what we want to ride. When you really can achieve that, it really feels more like we're riding a river, so to speak, that's flowing underneath us. That's why we get that wonderful feeling that the horses really get in the zone. And it just feels like it's flowing forward. That's what we want to have happen. Look how much better the step is here already. Really good stretch in that neck. And you can see that already his neck looks a foot longer or so than it did when I started. There, and look how much more active the hind legs become as he stretches down. And also look again at how straight this horse is behind. But look also again as he stretches down, look how much better the steps become. Now remember, this is a horse that has not done this before. When I started this horse, his mouth felt hard as a rock, which often people think their horses have dead mouths. Well, they don't really have dead mouths, they have dead backs. That's what you want to think about. Because as soon as we get a horse to stretch like this, automatically the jaw relaxes. And that's the big takeaway to remember, is that when horses are hollow in the back, they cannot relax the jaw correctly, nor can they flex at the poll, which is what's led to so many horses being overflexed in the third vertebrae and so many horses that are completely dead in the mouth. But as I said, even with a horse like this who seems very stiff. Now you can see now, when we came in on the text before, whoever filmed this came in a little later. I'd already been working him for a few minutes. So this is more like what you would have seen on the other side had they started the tape a little bit earlier. So you can see how he's very resistive, and all I do is just gradually keep asking him to step over. Now you see how I lift my inside right hand. That's when the horse is trying to push his shoulder into me. So if the horse pushes at you, you just lift your inside hand up to keep him from bearing down on the rein and pushing his shoulder into you as I get him to step over a little bit more. So this is what you would have seen in the other direction. I'd already worked that horse for a few minutes going through all this before he got to where we picked up the tape. And this is pretty much the way he was in the other direction as well. So you can see how he kind of wants to spin around me a little bit on this early part of the circle here. So I try to find a combination between keeping him moving and on a smaller circle than I would like him to be, while I very gradually get him to step away from that whip on the inside. Of course, different horses have different levels of sensitivity. Some you simply touch with a whip and they're jumping sideways, sensitive kind of thoroughbred horses. Other duller kind of horses kind of want to kind of challenge you a little bit more in that they'll try to push into you more. Not that thoroughbreds won't do that as well, they certainly will. But they tend to move away more easily because they're more sensitive horses. But at the same time, that sensitivity can make them very explosive. So while one thing makes one thing easier, it makes another thing harder, if that makes sense. And you can see here Miller, struggling. Look how there's almost no flexion in the hock and how short the step is on this side, how difficult time he has. Because, of course, his back is still hollow at this point. So the horse can barely step its hind leg underneath the body because of the drop in his back, which doesn't let the stride complete itself through the back. So I'm constantly going here from like just speeding him up a little bit when it gets too short and just opening it back up, trying to take that soft contact. And now he's begun to move off of my leg, which is the whip, of course, in this instance. And always remember that these exercises are just preliminary to getting on. We're basically teaching the horse the same thing we want him to respond to when we ride. So once we get up and ride, everything has kind of already been taught to the horse, and you just kind of ride away. It's much, much easier. If you just get on a horse's hollow in the back and try to achieve this with your weight up there, it's going to be a lot more difficult because we're basically trying to get the horse, who's been hollow his whole life to step up and learn a new exercise by lifting its back. But of course, if your weight's sitting on that back, it's going to be a lot harder for the horse to exercise, to understand. Now we can see here now he begins to cross over a little more, but see how stiff he is. And because of the hollow of the back, the hind leg can barely step under. There's hardly any flexion, and it has that kind of stuck in mud kind of situation. So what I do is I ask him to shorten a little bit, or not so much ask him to shorten, I ask him to step over, and he automatically kind of shortens. And then when he does that, I immediately come back and try to open it back up again. Now you can see how my outside hand raises. I always want to keep that outside rein back close to the withers back there, kind of mimicking the same position I would have if I were actually riding the horse. But remember, what we're doing here is teaching the horse to step into the contact with the outside rein. So it's very important that we have that outside rein back and long enough side the neck in the same position that we would have when we're riding. Now this can be a little difficult if you're not real tall, and in which cases I suggest sometimes for very short people, if you're trying this, if you have a bucking strap on the front of your saddle there, you can hook the outside rein through that, and that will keep it back during your working hand if you're not tall enough to reach up. You can see me doing and bringing the rein right back to where it belongs. But now watch as he starts to begin to stretch down. So he's understood what I want. Every time I get that little bit of acceptance of what I want, I give the rein a little bit. So he begins to follow that down. Now, of course, the beauty of this system is that what we're showing the horse here is a more comfortable way to do the work, which is why they don't resist it. I mean, there's not a horse in the world that doesn't resist having its head and neck pulled back into its body with draw reins or whatever else, or strong hands or bits. But you find this work, once again, we're working the horse towards a more comfortable way of doing the work it's doing itself. So it accepts that, and it feels good to it. We've seen some recent studies that have been shown that actually show that horses actually release endorphins when they stretch their necks down and out. Why? Mostly because I think it just feels comfortable to them, puts them in a place where they're able to do the work without the physical discomfort. And here he goes into the stretch, and look how the horse changes. I mean, even though this horse is 19, and you can see from his back there that he's quite hollow, and if you lifted that saddle up, you see that he's almost sway back. But look how much more comfortable he is, much more comfortable. The hind legs begin to step under the body as he reaches all the way down. Look how nice and floppy his ears became when he got to that position. Now I still want this to go a little faster than it's going here and begin to reach under, but we're beginning to see that. So remember when we started this, how short the hind legs stepped. And now look how much more comfortable he is. So this took me maybe 15 minutes in all. As I said, I was working him in the other hand a little before you guys picked up on the tape here. Just happened to be when somebody recorded this and sent it to me. So I thought this was a good example. People had asked me over and over again to see horses from the very beginning. Well, here's one right here. So it took me about 15 minutes to get this horse in this position. You saw I put up no great effort or fight with the horse. I just got him to step under the middle of the body. This is Will Faerber from Art to Ride.